Yesterday was Selection Sunday, which means, hey, it's the best time of the year if you're a college basketball fan. The first four, Tuesday and Wednesday, and for some local fans, Xavier Musketeer fans, they are going to be playing in the first four. Paul Fritchner, welcome to the show, host of the Rebound Rundown, one of the co-hosts of the Sean Miller podcast. Paul, it's great to see your smiling face, and I know it was a fantastic Sunday for you and really all of college basketball because they're going to get to see the Xavier Musketeers play in the first four.
No doubt about it. Really, this first four, Reed, first of all, thank you for having me on. But this first four overall, when you look at North Carolina, Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, I mean, this is a fun first four. You can argue all day about whether North Carolina should or should not have been in. I do not think they should have been in the tournament. But even still, they have some talent. They're a fun team when they play well. They didn't win a whole lot of games that mattered this year. But on Xavier's end, the relief of them getting into the tournament after the roller coaster that was this season, it was definitely a special one last night.
It's it's funny that you said that with North Carolina. You think that they shouldn't be in. Part of the reason is because they didn't win many big games. You know, when the graphic comes up of all the bubble teams, what's the first thing that people point out for Xavier? And it's a fair gripe is Q1, quad one game. Xavier was 1-9, I believe. For a short moment there, UConn bumped up to a quad. But essentially, they won 1 of 10 chances to be a quad one win. Do you think that's a fair criticism of Xavier? Because I know that's the first thing that people look at and they go, this team shouldn't be in. They went 1-9 in quad one games.
You're right. And by the letter of the law, they did. But what I will say is the committee knows and is smart enough and evaluates it close enough that UConn was, 1 or 2 spots away from being quad one. Creighton was in the 30s as well. They were a few spots away. Butler was a few spots away. It wasn't like Xavier was just completely beating up on Q3 and 4 the whole season. So a lot of those Q2 wins were close. They had some high-quality wins. They beat UConn. Look, Xavier beat every team in the Big East besides St. John's. This was, I think, the third highest Big East win total since realignment for Xavier, winning 13 games in Big East play. They only won 2 fewer games than 2 years ago when they made the Sweet 16 in Big East play. I know that the expectations before the season would have been a lot higher than an 11 seed, but even still, after what happened in November and December, the fact that they got in, it was to me, the selection show was a roller coaster in and of itself, because when it said San Diego State and North Carolina, I thought for sure that meant Xavier was out. I was not personally surprised at all that North Carolina got in. I know a lot of people were beyond shocked. And in the end, I was shocked that I think West Virginia being out is one of the most prominent exclusions from a tournament that I can ever remember. I mean, I thought when they weren't getting announced, I was like, man, did West Virginia get bumped up to a 9 seed? Like, they were projected as a 10 coming into the day. Maybe they got bumped up to a 9 here, and I'm just missing them until the last region. No, they did. They missed the tournament completely. So for North Carolina to be in over them, and for Indiana too, I thought Indiana had a stronger argument than North Carolina, that road win at Michigan State. I thought when North Carolina got their name announced, you had at least 2 teams that the committee might have put in over Xavier. I was nervous that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. They didn't. I had confidence when I saw Vanderbilt got a 10 seed. I looked at my wife, Lizzie, and I said, all right, I think we're in a good spot here, because Vanderbilt was a team I thought was on the bubble coming into the day. They got a 10 seed. Fellas, the seeding and the bracketing of this was one of the most bizarre I can ever remember. Teams were all over the place. Matchups were all over the place. I'm not sure what the committee was looking at for a lot of this. Gonzaga was an 8 seed. That'll be a top 10 Ken Pom matchup if Gonzaga and Houston win their first win their first game and match up in the second game. I don't know what the hell happened yesterday on the committee, but it doesn't matter, because in the end, we're splitting hairs. West Virginia was out, but in the end, I think the committee got it mostly right from a bubble perspective, outside of West Virginia, which is inexcusable.
So I think last time I had you on this show, I'm paraphrasing a quote that you said, but you said something along the lines of, who knows what the heck the committee is going to do. And I think that's the way that a lot of people feel after Sunday. The more that
sorry, we can't swear on the show, can we? We're on AM radio. That's my bad.
I said heck.
No, I said hell. My bad.
It's all right. Yeah. When you look at this committee, when you get off of Selection Sunday, it feels like every year we understand less, or we understand more, or we have more questions and more answered. Did you learn any lessons yesterday, about how the committee looks at this whole thing, looks at this whole picture?
Brands matter. Brands absolutely matter. If that's one thing that we learned yesterday, it is that having a brand, if we didn't know it already, brands matter. And that's why I thought that North Carolina was going to get in. When it came down to it, I thought North Carolina was going to get the edge over a Boise State or a Colorado State if they hadn't won the Mountain West, or, a UC Irvine that potentially had a case. I just thought that, look, this is a North Carolina team that didn't win any game this year that mattered, but they have the names on their team to kind of say, like RJ Davis, these guys to say, all right, we can put North Carolina in. I think that at the end of the day, looking forward to next year, that's something I'm just going to keep in mind, especially with this selection committee, that committee members rotate on and off, but it's hard to ignore. At the end of the day, guys, this is a TV show, right? And their job is to put on the most entertaining product for the television networks that are going to air these 67 games over the next 3 weeks. They need to put on a product that is entertaining, and part of the way to make that entertaining is to put some big brands in the field, like it or not.
I'm with you. I just if the idea is how to get as many big brands in there, leaving Indiana out seems like a miss, right? Because
I agree.
You and I are Xavier fans. Putting Indiana over Xavier is a much better. Selling tickets at the first four is one thing, but in terms of getting people to watch the thing, a lot more people are going to watch Indiana over Xavier. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So
I'm just not sure why Indiana didn't make it over North Carolina. Like, if they were going to use that last spot for a big brand, because the committee came on afterwards and said that North Carolina was the last team in, which means that if Memphis had lost in the AAC title game yesterday, that the first team that would have gotten bumped out was North Carolina. I'm surprised from a branding perspective that they went with North Carolina instead of Indiana, because, Indiana's closer. They have a little more cachet to their resume this year. I don't get the North Carolina thing.
My question to you, and hi, Paul. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm doing great, Paul. My question to you about North Carolina is, if they thought North Carolina, whatever they did this year was great. They thought, I guess, clearly the ACC was worth something if North Carolina got in with one quad one win. I guess they thought their conference schedule was tough enough. How in the world, and this was I believe the third team announced, how in the world is Louisville an 8 seed? Because that was, and I'm going to read this off real quick before you answer. Seed of AP number 13 teams entering Selection Sunday, 2024, and I'm just going to go down the list of 2012. Illinois 3, Virginia 4, UCLA 4, Texas, Purdue, Tennessee, all 3. Purdue got a 5 in 2016. They were ranked 13th. And Iowa State, UC, Florida, Georgetown. Nobody has even been a 6 seed. How in the world, and I know they're playing the game in Lexington, but how in the world do they get discredited so much and then go on top of that and double down and say, North Carolina, we're going to credit you more than Louisville?
I have no idea. And that's where I say, when I was wondering if Xavier was going to get in or not, initially, when you see the 6-11 game right away in that first region, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. But when you see Louisville as an 8 seed and the way that the rest of that first region broke out, I just had no idea what was going on. And Louisville, think about what Louisville did this year. They came up a little bit short against Duke in the ACC title game. And how do they get rewarded? A 9 seed, a really good Creighton team. Creighton got a worse seed than UConn did. And Creighton all of a sudden now plays Louisville. And Louisville, even if they win, even if they beat Creighton, and I'm not sure they'll beat Creighton, if they beat Creighton, now you get the number 1 overall seed in the second game to go to the Sweet 16. The ACC being all over the place. I mean, Clemson, they get slotted as a 5 seed, which is fine, but they get McNeese as a 12. I know all the 5-12s are usually tough, but like Clemson got no favors there. Duke's path to me is a cakewalk into at least the Elite Eight, if not the Final Four. I think Duke has no problem with, unless Cooper Flagg is hurt, unless he can't go. Obviously, that would change the whole dynamic of the tournament. But I don't know, Elliot. I have no idea what was going on with Louisville, and Pat Kelsey talked on Kentucky Sports Radio last night with Matt Jones about it and just how he didn't understand it either.
It makes no sense. Once they announced that, I knew it was going to be a chaotic Selection Sunday. I saw a lot of Michigan fans upset yesterday. You win 4 days in March. You win the Big Ten tournament. How are you rewarded? How about one of the toughest 12 seeds in the tournament? You get a 5.
That's a quad one game. That's a quad one game.
My question to you is, and again, clearly there is no rules here. There's no rules. Every preconceived notion you have about Selection Sunday and what it means, these quad 1, quad 2 wins, North Carolina somehow gets in. Then you go on a magical run in the Big Ten. They don't really get rewarded, Michigan. And now we're looking at this whole bracket and being very, very confused at what the conference tournament means. So in your eyes, let's just look at Xavier, for example. Let's say they beat Marquette. Do you think they were already penciled in the first 4? Do you think beating Marquette and then losing the next game would have changed anything? Would they have just been in the field? Because there weren't really any bid stealers, but I think they had their minds made up before everything was completed.
And that's exactly what I said the last time you guys had me on this show, was that going into conference tournament week, you have to adjust your expectations and realize that the committee does not care about conference tournament week. And they showed it again. I want to go back and back that up and make sure that I'm not getting over my skis on that, because I didn't really get a chance to go back to all these teams. But for the most part, my initial gut reaction was that, the committee just completely devalues or doesn't value, because they're already bracketing the field, what's going on during the conference tournament week. If Xavier had beaten Marquette, look, Xavier was the second team in Dayton, so they had two teams below them. They had Texas above them, which means that Xavier would have only had to leap Texas and then potentially one other team to get out of Dayton. Adding another quad 1 win, maybe, but I just don't see it. I think Xavier was always Dayton bound, and barring 3 bid stealers, was always going to be in the tournament.
You say that it's and that's a reoccurring theme amongst people that watch the most college basketball, is that these conference tournaments don't matter. That being said, it has to matter if you're going to even begin to explain how West Virginia doesn't make it, right? Because they lose to Colorado. They lose. It has to, I think, matter if you're going to explain how North Carolina making a decent run in the ACC tournament. They have to matter if you're going to begin to explain those two choices. No?
The only thing I would say about West Virginia, though, is that the committee chair got on afterwards, and they were talking about the committee chair. A couple of the guys from the committee got on, and they were talking about Tucker DeVries being injured. Fellas, Tucker DeVries hasn't played since December 6th. He hasn't played. They beat Kansas at Kansas. They beat Iowa State without him, and they still didn't get in, which, again, makes me wonder, was West Virginia just never in because they went to vote for West Virginia, saw that Tucker DeVries wasn't on the team, and said, But then what happens with Iowa State? TJ Otzelberger gets on the podium right after the selection show and says, you know what, our best player, Keyshawn Gilbert, he's not playing. They just waited until after the selection show to do that. And the Duke had to write to the committee or put out a statement and say that Cooper Flagg was going to be fine next week. I mean, this is the same thing with college football. Florida State, last year. It's just these injuries playing into it. I do agree, though, on the West Virginia thing, that loss to Colorado, maybe that was the killer. Maybe that is what flipped West Virginia out, North Carolina in. Hard to say, but don't lose to Colorado.
Wednesday, Xavier's in the tournament. How are we looking? How confident are you in this game on Wednesday night to get into the official field of 64?
I'll put a little caveat on this, that you can only have so good of a matchup as an 11 seed, right? I mean, you can't have the most ideal matchup because you're an 11 seed, and that's why you're in Dayton, and all of these games are going to be tough. But personally, even beyond Dayton, if Xavier's able to win, I don't think Xavier could have asked for much better this weekend. You have Texas on Wednesday night, who has one of the best freshmen in the SEC in Trey Johnson, a phenomenal scorer, but they kind of go as he goes. They have Caden Shedrick on the interior. He's 6'11". He's good. He's not great. I think that's an advantage for Zach Fremantle. This is going to be a very fun game for the guards and the wings. I think this is a game that could get up and down, and you could see some good shooting in this game. I think Xavier is going to have the opportunity to get their looks from three in this game. Xavier is favored for a reason on Wednesday night. They're slight favorites, but they're favored for a reason. Texas is healthy now, which they haven't been healthy for a large part of this season. But Texas limped to the finish line. They won a couple games in the SEC tournament. But I think that if you're Xavier, unless you were playing maybe San Diego State, you couldn't have asked for much better here in the first four. And then beyond the first four, you have Illinois, who, when Illinois is playing at their best, is a 2 or 3 seed. But when they're playing at their worst, they're a 8 or 9 seed, 10 seed. And what they do, they split the middle. They're a 6 seed here. Illinois has some bad losses. And then on the other side, you have Kentucky. If you're able to win I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but if you're able to win those, if you're able to win those two, you have Kentucky, who has shown a ton of vulnerability this year, and Lamont Butler is obviously coming back from an injury. I don't think that if you're a Xavier fan, you could have asked for much more. Illinois would be a challenge, but Texas on Wednesday night, I think that this is a matchup Xavier will like going into it, and that there's a reason they're favored in this one.
Yeah, NCAA Tournament, yada, yada, yada. What about the Crown?
Well, I was going to ask you.
The Crown Invitational. Historic Crown.
Well, I was going to ask you, Elliot. So, I used to work at Chatterbox Sports, and I know that when I worked at Chatterbox Sports, there was a bunch of eateries right in downtown Hamilton. And if you went a little farther down past downtown Hamilton, there was a very fine establishment, Burger King. And when you go into Burger King, they have these little, paper crowns. And I just thought maybe you'd pick one of those up and put it on for the show.
Oh, it's so good.
That's a good question.
It's so good to hear that. It's so good to hear it. Who do you got in the first round of the Crown, UC or DePaul?
Is that who they're playing?
Yeah.
What a great match.
I don't know if DePaul plays like they did the other day. What's the availability going to be like? That's my biggest question. Who's all playing? Like, what is just in general? I'm not asking UC specific. I just mean in general. What is the Crown doing when they open or when they play after the transfer portal is open? What I just don't understand the logistics of it.
It makes no sense. As far as I know, you have to have 7 scholarship players available. I guess that's the case for UC because otherwise they wouldn't be playing in it. But I think it's a disgrace. I think the whole tournament's a sham. These teams are contractually obligated to play in a tournament that nobody wants to play in. So I understand money. I get all that. But at the end of the day, extending this UC season is a travesty, and I think it's a bad look really for the entire Bearcats program to be playing in this. I don't get it either, Paul. I don't understand the Crown. I don't get it. That one, by the way, that was a joke question. I have one last actual tournament question for you. The SEC 14 teams, justified or not? And then what do you think the farthest SEC team is? Who do you think goes the furthest out of all the SEC teams?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me pull up real quick here. I want to make sure one thing before I answer it. 14 teams I think is justified. I know people would clap back at me with the conference record, but if you flip the conference record to winning some of those games in the non-conference and then you took losses, in the non-conference instead, if you just flipped where the teams were playing, like it's a weird looking number and you don't like it, but I can understand where the committee's not caring as much about bad conference records when there are so many teams in these big super conferences now. So yeah, I probably would have taken, well, for one, I would have taken West Virginia over another SC. I would have taken West Virginia over Texas into the first 4. So from that perspective, but there's no argument necessarily with Texas because they have so many quad 1 wins. They stacked losses, but they have so many quad 1 wins that it's hard to argue against it. As far as a SEC team that's going to go the farthest in the field, I, you know, Florida. I think Florida could win the national championship.
That's who I've got. That's who I've got too.
I don't think Florida has a weakness anywhere right now with the way they're playing. It's a shame to me being in the same region as St. John's because I really wanted to pick St. John's to the Final Four. I just don't know if I'm going to do that here with how well Florida has been playing lately. Auburn's looked pretty vulnerable in the last week or two. Maybe that's just because they took their foot off the gas and they'll turn it back up a notch. Tennessee, it wouldn't shock me if Tennessee got clipped in the first two rounds, in the second round or the third round. Wouldn't clip me there. It wouldn't shock me if they did. Alabama's got to get through Duke. I think Florida is your answer there, Elliot.
Paul, last time Xavier played NCAA tournament game, it was against Texas, Sweet 16, a couple years ago. Before that game, you riled up the troops and you marched them into the arena, leading them into battle. Have we worked on a new pitch before we get into battle at UD Arena for Wednesday?
So let me ask you this, because you're a little more familiar probably with that area than I am. What is the grand stage of Dayton, Ohio that I could do that?
You can get them all to go to Kramer's Pizza, Kramer's Carryout. It's a great place. They only serve 40s there, and they serve great pizza. And you get them all riled up. You get the troops, and then admittedly you have to get in your cars and drive a little bit to UD Arena. But it'll be a beautiful little I don't know. You'll just charge them in there to UD. My favorite college basketball arena.
Are you going to be there
Wednesday? So. Right now, the answer is no. But I've heard of a strategy. I've heard of a strategy that might possibly get. I used to have a plug that could get me to Dayton games. Unfortunately, he no longer works at the University of Dayton anymore. So I can't call it him. He moved on up to the University of Illinois Chicago. But so. All right. We'll see.
Well, if you make it there, I'll see you.
Well, I got to know where the pep rally is.
I will let you know. As soon as I lock down the drive-through, I will let you know.
All right. Sounds good.